Honeywish was stunned. She knew and accepted that terrible things would happen, especially out in the wild, where life wasn't as soft and suffocating as it was near the flat two-leg places. Accidents and disasters happened. Leaf Bear carried with it deadly illnesses. Foxes prowled at the edge of clan territory and stole away clanmates. And forest fires happened. Honeywish watched silently as more trees were consumed by the flames that licked around the clan's den site territory. In a weird twist of the flames, it seemed as though only the very heart of clan territory was burning. The nursery, the den site, the medicine cat den, the training grounds at the edge of Moss Clan camp were practically untouched, beyond a few patches of ash and wisps of smoke. She watched as the clan camp burned, feeling oddly detached. Forest fires happened, after all. This wasn't unheard of. Moss Clan certainly wasn't the only clan to lose a camp to such a thing. Just the way it had happened. Honeywish drew in a sharp breath as she remembered the screaming stones falling from the sky, crashing into camp and sending flame and shards of rock flying everywhere. She had been in the den sites when it happened, and had immediately been surrounded by falling branches and broken trees. By the prey pile, she had heard the terrified calls of the kits. Red Kit, who had been so dutifully sitting and protecting the beetles in the prey pile as he always did, and his sister Robin Kit, who had come to join him. Honeywish hadn't been sure what was worse, her utter panic as she was surrounded, trapped, by a world of leaves and approaching flames, or her inability to claw through the branches and reach the heartfelt pleas of the clan's kits crying for help. When they had gone silent, she had assumed the worst, and had nearly given in there. Her panic had tangled her deep into the fallen branches, and flames had already started to arrive. When the first fiery branch touched her skin, she had screamed in pain, and had been ready for death. She hadn't been able to think about anything except the flames and the fact she was about to die. And then... "Are you all right?" Silverfang meowed, his voice low with concern. Honeywish jumped and glanced at the silver cat next to her, feeling her heart slow down to a normal rate, and the panic beginning to recede. She nodded, taking a few deep breaths to steady herself. At her feet, Red Kit and Robin Kit were curled up in tight balls, exhaustion and terror having finally won out as the forest fire raged on, and left them sound asleep against the deputy's side. "Yes, I'm fine, actually," Honeywish meowed slowly, shocked to find that the words were true. Silverfang snorted and gave a pointed glance at the burns along Honeywish's sides, and she shook her head, flicking an ear to dismiss them. "I mean, that hurts, obviously, and the camp." Her voice caught for a moment, but she took a deep breath and carried on. "The camp is destroyed, at least for now, and so much has happened to the clan. But I'm fine. I'm alive." She blinked her eyes, one green, one blue, and they were clear of shock or terror. She looked at Silverfang, holding his gaze. "I'm alive. Thank you. How did you do it?" "I'm not quite as old as I look," Silverfang purred, his voice cracking from the smoke. Honeywish shot him a look, her tail swishing in a playful question. He chuckled softly, the background sound of the forest fire odd against their gentle humor. "Well, I may be, but clan life has been good to me." He glanced out over the camp, frowning as the two cats watched their camp burn. "I'm stronger here in so many more ways than I ever was living with the two legs, or in the shadows of the barnyard. And the bonds that I've made with the other cats of the clan, they've taught me that there is so much worth fighting for." Silverfang looked into Honeywish's eyes, and both cats stared at one another for a moment, before Honeywish nodded and dropped her head. "There is, and will rebuild." She sighed and glanced down at the kits by her feet, a thoughtful look in her eyes. "The clan life will go on. We'll be sure of it." Silverfang sighed softly beside her and settled in, both cats watching the sleeping, exhausted kits rather than the fire for a change. Honeywish had nearly cried with relief to find the two of them safe under the big oak. Silverfang had rescued them as soon as the stones hit, collecting the confused kits from the prey pile and herding them to safety. And then he had come back for her. "You sure you're fine?" Silverfang meowed again, glancing at Honeywish's burns. Honeywish flicked her tail, unable to bring herself to glance towards Dogaze, who was still busy tending to a slowly reviving Lionstar. Honeywish nodded slowly, her eyes still locked on the kits, an odd sense of peace among the chaos in her heart. I really am. You're here, after all, Silverfang. Everything always seems right when you're around. Lionstar, try to stay still. Dogaze dashed over to where the large orange tabby had begun stirring, already struggling to pull himself to his feet. Although he still staggered with exhaustion and pain, Dogaze couldn't deny how her heart leapt to see at least one of her 3 current patients showing some sign of recovery. Steeling herself to put the thought of Crowfeather aside, she hurried over to the Moss Clan leader's side, sniffing him over rapidly. I examined you while you were still... She took a deep breath, tensing as she told herself to be a blunt medicine cat about the situation. While you were still dead. And you don't have any lasting injuries, I believe, but I still need to examine you to be sure. Lionstar turned his head slowly, gazing at the forest around him. Smoke still billowed up from the fire that continued to rage through Moss Clan camp, though the sound of the flames was more muted now that the fire had spread deeper into the forest and away from the huddled clan cats. Dogaze stood for a moment in front of her silent clan leader, then slowly lowered her head and took a deep breath. She had lost clan and home before, but watching as it happened again to the cat she had come to love and consider her own brought a painful exhaustion right to the very depths of her heart. Even more than that, she felt a flicker of shame at how relieved she was that Lionstar had woken up. Of course, she was glad that he was alive, but now that he had regained consciousness and seemed to be unhurt, perhaps he could take control of the situation. With Honeywish so injured, so far all of the decisions had been on Dogaze's shoulders to make. And Dogaze shivered, a cold feeling of shame welling at her toes as she realized just how eager she was to return command of the clan to a cat who had just suffered so much, had died, and who was watching as the home he had built burned to the ground. Dogaze. Dogaze jumped at the sound of Lionstar's voice. The orange tabby pulled his gaze away from the fire and turned his attention to the medicine cat. Dogaze blinked back tears at the deep sorrow in his eyes. Lionstar nodded solemnly to Dogaze, his shoulders slumping slightly under the burden of his leadership. Tommy and Squirreleap have been telling me what has been happening with the clan. Thank you for watching over everyone. I know we couldn't make it through this without you and your skills. I don't have any skills, Dogaze snapped, drawing back as her icy calm shattered and panic flared in her chest. I didn't have any skills then, when my clanmates needed me the most, and I don't have any skills now, either. If I did... Dogaze whipped her head to the side, pain and sorrow making it difficult to speak. If I did, then I would be able to do more to help everyone. But I don't know enough. I never had a chance to learn properly from my mentor, and now the clan is suffering from how empty-headed and worthless I am. I can't even save Crowfeather. And even though he is so terribly hurt, if I just had a plasma bug, I might be able to do something. But without it, what good am I as a medicine cat? Dogaze. Lionstar leaned forward, staring intently at the distressed medicine cat before him. Dogaze felt herself trembling, as though she were on the verge of running away from all this, running away from the fire and the disappointment and the constant loss of those she loved, and how again and again and again her skills were simply not enough to save anyone. Just as soon as she could breathe normally again, as soon as her head stopped spinning, as soon as Lionstar let her know that it was true, that it was all true, if only she was a better medicine cat, if only Bearglow was here. Dogaze, are you sure you've lost everything? Lionstar narrowed his eyes, then glanced between the sleek black body of Crowfeather and the burning medicine cat den, his movements slow but resolved. Is there any chance anything has survived that you could use? What about the plasma bug I gave you earlier, after the morning patrol meeting, when I went in to lay down with Mossleaf? Yes, I lost everything, Dogaze gasped, pain racking her voice. I've already gone as close as I can to the heat, and what I can see, it's all ash. The dried herbs, the flowers, the piles of healing items, even the herbs we just collected on the journey. I had everything set out front, right where the fire started, and I was sorting them when... Dogaze stopped suddenly, her eyes going wide. I was sorting the last of them, and the prey that had been brought to me for the morning meal. You walked by while I was eating, and I... The medicine cat leapt to her feet and spun around, her emotional exhaustion and sense of defeat forgotten as she had one clear, shining goal in her mind. She burst into a run and dashed towards the rock where she had been resting just a short time earlier that morning, sorting herbs and gathering wet moss to clean the medicine cat den with. Lionstar had approached her and given her the plasma bug and assassin beetle he had caught on their journey. She had thanked him, intent on the snake she was eating, and then put them to the side to sort the rest of the herbs for later. Dogaze staggered as the rock came into view. Everything, even on the edge of camp like this, looked so different with the heavy smoke of the fire hanging over their heads. Bits of ash swirled across the ground, and shattered pieces of tree trunks and branches were everywhere. The moss beds that had been against the rock where she had been sitting were totally gone, just scorch marks on the ground, and for a moment her heart stopped as she thought they would be gone. But there, between the ash! With a gasp, Dogaze clawed away the burnt leaves and pulled out the glowing body of the purple plasma bug. Crowfeather was still as unmoving as ever. She would have thought he had already died, his spirit disappearing to StarClan, if it weren't for the terrifyingly slow rise and fall of his chest. Ignoring the startled cries from Tommy and Squirreleap, Dogaze slid to a stop next to the prone black cat, dropping the plasma bug with delicate care in front of him. Her eyes narrowed as she lifted a paw and slid out a claw, every part of her attention completely focused on the task in front of her. Her worries about her skills, her sorrow over the pain of her clans, the fatigue and pain her body were in, all of it vanished as she worked on carefully breaking open the case of the plasma bug and gingerly scooping the glowing purple goo into Crowfeather's mouth. Please. Dogaze felt her heart lurch in her chest, and suddenly it was difficult to breathe. Somehow she knew she not only stood on the brink of Crowfeather's life, but the fate of her own faith in StarClan. Please, StarClan, if you're really there, if you really care, heal him! Dogaze worked so intently that she wasn't aware of time passing, but time must have passed, because as she rubbed Crowfeather's throat and forced him to swallow the very last of the glowing goo, she became aware of a crowd behind her. Blinking in confusion, she glanced over her shoulder, finding Lionstar, Tommy, Briarstalk, and Oakpaw gathered around her. She froze and glanced at their faces, but no one seemed to be upset or have anger in their eyes. Instead, her clanmates were looking at her with respect? Gratitude? She glanced at Lionstar, and the Moss Clan leader held her gaze, then nodded slowly and dipped his head towards her. I don't know if it's enough, Dogaze whispered, lowering her head slightly. He has been very badly injured for a long time, so it may not be enough to help him survive. You've done all you can do, Dogaze, Lionstar meowed quietly. The gathered cats stilled at his voice, relief flickering through the group at the sound of their leader guiding them again. And that is all we could possibly ask for. Dogaze let out a deep sigh, her shoulders slumping with exhaustion. In some far part of her mind, she knew Lionstar was right, and yet it wasn't in his paws that a cat's life hung at this very moment. She glanced down at Crowfeather. He still looked just the same as he had before, no better and no worse. Dogaze closed her eyes, feeling hollow. If StarClan really was watching over them, why weren't they helping him? Someone help! Squirreleap's voice cut through the group, making every cat jump. Squirreleap staggered towards them, stood on her paws and her eyes wide with concern. It's Mossleaf. She's woken up, but I think something's wrong. Mossleaf pushed at the grass in front of her, panic surging through her blood. The fire! The fire! She had to get Lionstar out. Where was he? With a sharp gasp, Mossleaf lifted her head, her eyes wide and frantic as she glanced around her, confused and disoriented. The hot flames that had been leaping for her fur just a moment before were gone, replaced with slightly damp grass and the lapping of the small pond outside of the medicine cat den. Mossleaf trembled as she jerked her head from side to side, trying to take in what she was seeing. Instead of leaping flames, there was just hazy smoke in the distance, the heavy branches of the bushes around the pond still standing tall and shading her. The fire was gone, and she was laying alone by the pond. But the flames! Mossleaf tossed her head, panic rearing. She could still hear the flames! Where were they? She whipped her head around, her body too sore and in too much pain to move much, and looked over her shoulder, expecting the flames to be reaching for her, ready to capture her, and there was nothing there. Only the shadows of the forest undergrowth, disturbingly normal considering the raging fire that had been in the clan territory. Where? Mossleaf gasped, looking around herself. Where is everyone? Lionstar! Honeywish! Tommy! Where are you? Mossleaf staggered slowly to her feet, her whole body shaking. She couldn't hear anything but the flames, but she couldn't see them either. Where was everyone? Where was... She staggered, then let out a scream as she collided with the furry body. She jerked her head up and stared in shock at Lionstar, who was standing right in front of her. Lionstar, there you are! Where were you? Are you okay? Where are our kits? Mossleaf meowed, her voice frantic. She took a few shallow breaths before she glanced at the cats beside her mate. Dogaze, Tommy, Squirrely, Briarstock, even Oakpaw was there. You're okay! All of you, you're... Mossleaf glanced at Lionstar, confused. Why hadn't he replied to her yet? Why hadn't she heard them approaching? Lionstar? Mossleaf looked at her mate again, watching him in confusion. She could see his mouth moving, and his eyes were intent on hers. But... Lionstar? Why can't I hear you?